Hi, my name is Katie, and yeah. Yeah, and yeah.
I'm Logan.
I'm Taylor.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Colin.
I'm Emmanuel Cruz de Grão here.
I'm Katie.
Okay.
So, we'll
I
be
won't,
giving you...
real quick, I'm terrible with names, so
It's
I'm
okay.
gonna have to
That's
ask
fine.
you.
Yeah, I'm just.
Okay.
So, we'll be giving you a book summary. So, in class, you're reading a book called The 57 Bus, which is based off a true story that happened in Oakland, California in 2013. So, there are two main characters in the story, Sasha and Richard. Sasha, a gender teen who likes to be referred to as they, them, and their instead of typical pronouns. There's Richard. Richard is a troubled teen who goes to a public school, unlike Sasha, while riding the 57 bus home, Sasha's skirt was lit on fire by Richard as a prank. This prank got out of control and caused Sasha to receive second and third degree burns. Richard's mom, Jasmine, is a teen mom who struggled to support him when he was born. So that's a brief summary.
Yeah, heavy book.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the first question.
Okay.
In the book, there is a person named Andrew who does not feel confident with his gender. How would you help Andrew in finding who he is and what he believes his gender is?
Good question. So my role as a therapist isn't really like to tell people what their gender is or to judge what their gender is. So what I do is I have people come to me and they'll tell me, how they're feeling, what their gender is, and we roll with it. And explore that and process that, and then hopefully they come to the conclusion on their own. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, good deal.
Okay. In the book, Sasha is an agender teen who has chosen their preferred bathroom. There's a lot of political arguments over whether or not we should have gender-neutral bathrooms. What is your view on gender-neutral bathrooms, and how might this conversation impact some of your patients?
Okay, sure. So the thing about, first of all, has anybody ever felt uncomfortable in a place or a situation?
Yes.
Felt uncomfortable? Okay, so now imagine being asked to go to the bathroom in that place. Pretty awkward, right? Okay, so the purpose and the importance of gender neutral bathrooms is that people have a space that they feel comfortable in, because going to the bathroom is pretty vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And it can be awkward. So being in a bathroom that doesn't fit your gender, can make that way, way worse. So I've been really lucky in my office to have two gender neutral bathrooms, and they're just single bathrooms, and whoever can use them. And that has been really great for my clients. Clients tend to get harassed in bathrooms. Clients who are transgender made fun of, feel really alienated, so it is important to have those gender neutral bathrooms.
Okay, in the book, Sasha gets accepted into a college far away from their high school and where they are comfortable. How do you help someone like Sasha get and be comfortable in a new place?
Oh, okay, so that's hard for everybody, right? Going away to college, being away from family. So at all different colleges, there are usually groups on campus for all sorts of different types of people, right? For people in the LGBTQ community, for women, for men, for people who are far away from home, for people who like art, for people who like sports. So a big part of helping people get comfortable on the way to college is to help them find resources that will connect them to peers who are similar to them. So apart from processing and talking about it in counseling, but also a big part of problem solving too, and helping people find a group that they can click with and feel comfortable in.
In the book, Sasha was set on fire on the 57 bus. They had to go through a lot of surgeries and also had to have multiple skin grafts. How would you help them through this?
Okay, so that is traumatic for anyone, right? There's an extra layer of trauma there because it was considered a hate crime, and technically was a hate crime, regardless of whether or not Richard did it to be hateful. So a big part of that is processing trauma, and when I say processing, I mean talking about it, helping clients understand what happened to them, maybe helping clients forgive, because some people do want to forgive. And I know Sasha's family in the book was really, they struggled with it, but at the end they were open to forgiveness, and they read that really powerful letter and were really touched by the letter Sasha wrote to them, or that Richard wrote to them. So that's a big part of it. There's also different types of therapy that addresses trauma. So I won't go into all of them, but there's one called EMDR, and it's a form of treatment that accesses both parts of your brain and helps you process trauma. It's really complicated, but it's interesting, so look it up. There's a form of therapy called Sandtray therapy, which is one of my favorites. It's more of like a creative, artistic type of therapy, and that's really good to help process trauma as well. Those are some of my ideas.
In the 57 bus, after Richard was sent to jail, it talks about his mom, Jasmine, and the emotions and changes her life had when Richard was taken away. So what would you do to help in these situations, and how could this affect the whole family?
That is so hard because their situation was really heartbreaking, and it was heartbreaking for Jasmine too. She was really hurt and felt so sad for her son, and then felt sad for Sasha and for Sasha's family. So that was something that, again, talking about that in counseling and really brainstorming ways like, how can we help you adjust to this lifestyle now that your son is in jail? How can we help you connect to resources of parents who have maybe been through something similar? There are a lot of groups. Group therapy is great. Support groups are great, so people can connect with each other and things can feel not normal, but relatable.
In the 57 bus after the fire, Sasha is taken off the bus and placed on the sidewalk, and she was in shock. How do you help someone who has had this happen?
Again, trauma, right? How terrifying must that have been? That whole part, who else just felt like just so shocked and hurt when they read that? So I would do the same sorts of treatment that I talked about for trauma and other cases. Sandtray therapy, EMDR, there are trauma specialists, there are support groups, so really digging back into that.
Sometimes parents make their students go to therapy and they might not want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and they might not want to open up. How do you get a client to open up to you?
Good question, right? Because if they don't want to be there, they're gonna be like, ugh. And I do have some clients that do come in and are like, oh, I do not want to be in here. That's okay. I get it. Sometimes you don't want to come to therapy. Sometimes people have really different ideas about what therapy is. So what do you guys think usually happens in therapy? Any ideas?
You like talk to them?
Mm-hmm. Just talk. Yeah, talk about problems. Does anybody picture like a movie version where you're like laying down on a couch and they're like taking notes? That's not what I do. So I do a lot of play therapy and art therapy. So play therapy kind of sounds like it's for little kids, but it can be used for people from the ages of 2 all the way up to 102. It's a lot of fun, and you just engage in different activities that help you process your emotions without feeling like you are just sitting on a couch and talking. Art therapy includes a lot of painting. I made dream catchers all week last week, and that was a lot of fun. So that's usually how I get people to open up, just not sitting there and grilling them and asking them a lot of questions.
Okay, so what do you have to do to become a therapist?
Okay, so there are different ways to become a therapist. I'll tell you the way I went. So I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and that took 4 years. And then after that, I went to Illinois State University and got my master's degree in clinical counseling psychology, and that took 2 years. And then after that, you can get your license. So you get your licensed professional counselor license, and that's issued by the state of Illinois. And then after working for 2 years, you get your LCPC, which is your licensed clinical professional counselor certification, and that's also through the state. And then you just move forward with counseling and work. Some people choose to get a PhD, so that's an extra 6 years of counseling, or extra 6 years of school, which I chose to not do. They do a lot of teaching and research, and I wanted to focus more on practice and counseling.
How do you help parents who don't understand how their children feel when they are going through the transgender process?
So I'll tell you guys, I want to clarify. So transgender and non-binary clients, that's not my specialty. My specialty is 2 ages 2 through college students. I've worked with a few transgender clients, and I called one of my best friends in Florida, and that is his specialty. So he talked to me a little bit about what he does in that situation, and he said most of it is education, because a lot of parents aren't familiar with people who are transgender or non-binary. So he said there's a lot of resources, books that you can have parents read, support groups, and those are really good ways to help parents process that.
Do you want me to
Okay.
read your? Okay.
How do you help a person going through a gender transition to follow up? What do you do when someone is having a really hard time emotionally with anything?
With anything?
Yeah, with like
Okay.
something.
Yeah. So supporting someone is really important. So just being there with them through the process, talking to them, maybe scheduling 2 sessions a week if they're having a really hard time instead of just one. There's also crisis hotlines in the area. Do you guys know about like PATH and the suicide prevention hotline? Yeah, and I'm guessing you went over the Trevor Project too, maybe? So with the Trevor Project, that is a crisis hotline for LGBTQ youth. And they are open 24/7, just like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And they also have, it's really interesting if you go to their website, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, but you can Google it. They have a page on there about how to be an ally and how to support friends and other people who are part of the LGBTQ community. So again, like linking people with resources, giving them the counseling they need, and just asking them what they need. People will tell you if you ask.
Okay, how do you know what to say to your patients?
How do I know what to say?
Yes.
Sometimes I don't know what to say. I have a lot of training, and I go to continuing education classes pretty regularly, and that helps me come up with ideas about what to say to clients and what activities to do with clients. So it's all about education and just being in the moment with someone. Sometimes there's no exact formula, if that makes sense.
Okay. How do family therapists work? Like the first step to.
First step for counseling. Okay, so most people find me online and give me a call, and we talk over the phone, and then they set up an appointment, and we just kind of go from there. Usually the first session is signing boring paperwork and getting background information, so that way I have a better idea of what's going on with my client.
What is the biggest problem that most transgender people have?
Okay, biggest problem that they have. Okay, so I would say bullying and harassment. I don't want to speak for everybody, but what I have seen a lot of is bullying, rejection by peers and family, and harassment. Transgender people face a lot of violence, as we've seen in this book. And so that's why it's so important to be an ally and to be supportive.
Oh. I'm sorry.
No.
What is your strengths as a therapist?
So that's a hard one to answer, isn't it? Okay, so I think that I am, not to brag on myself, I think I'm pretty funny and relatable. I get along really well with most of my clients, even the ones that don't want to be there. So I think that's my strength.
If the problem of a family, if the problem of a family that you can't understand, you help the family till you understand the problem, or just has a limited visit for each family.
Good question. So, my theory is people can stay in counseling for as long as they need to stay in counseling. People can usually tell me when they've solved their problems and when they're done with the process. So there's no really limited amount of counseling in my practice. In other practices, especially community mental health practices, sometimes the number of sessions is limited just because the large amount of people that they serve. I try and keep my caseload kind of small to moderate, so that way I can really go with what my clients need.
Oh, okay. Recently I've learned that there are different types of strategies a family therapist can use. Can you tell us exactly what different types of strategies, well, you already did, which strategies are more effective in your opinion?
Oh, that's so the funny thing about that is if you guys have already talked to another therapist, I bet they told you or are going to tell you completely different strategies than mine. It's a really personal thing. I like to use play therapy and art therapy. Those are my favorites. I know CBT came up in the book with Richard and his juvenile detention center. That is really helpful too and great for group settings. I stick with play therapy and more creative approaches because I think they're easier to engage in and I think people tend to enjoy them more. And there's good research on them too.
Me again. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So how do you deal with families that won't open up to each other? Like how?
Like that they
Yeah.
won't open up to each other.
Yeah.
So that is where my love of sand tray therapy is. Sand tray therapy is really hard to not open up while you're using. So clients come in with their families and they make a sand tray, and a sand tray is like a little sandbox that sits on a table, and I have this whole wall of miniatures. They're little toys, and I can show you guys pictures if you want to see them. And you put the miniatures in the tray to arrange and express how you're feeling. And the funny thing about them is that it's like they open up a whole different part of your brain and you share things that you never would. I always joke about this. My husband thought it was just kind of ridiculous. He was like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I was doing a presentation. I was teaching some college students how to do it. And I was like, okay, Jordan, just like practice with me real quick. And he's like, oh, okay. So we start. We're like 5 minutes in and he pushes it away. And he's like, I don't want to do this anymore because it's intense and you share more than you think you would. So that's my main strategy. Kind of went on a rant. That's my fave.
Why is family therapy such a good thing for families?
Great thing for families because we don't always communicate with our families like if we want to. And I think teens sometimes, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe parents don't listen to you guys as much as you wish they did. Okay. So it's great to have a space where you can talk freely and have someone help you talk to your parents about what you're going through or what you need.
What is your favorite thing about being a therapist?
I love being a therapist. I love helping people feel better. I love seeing people's progress. I love that I get to hang out and make cool art projects and just see people light up after a fun session or cry during a hard session and say, wow, that was really important for me to talk about.
What are some characteristics that a soon-to-be therapist would possess?
Like a therapist in training?
Yes.
Okay, so being genuine and being really caring and dedicated to the field. If you're going to be a therapist, you have to like people. You want to be able to sit down with people and talk about their feelings. And another thing that's really important is to figure out how to feel comfortable watching people cry, because that can be a really difficult thing. What about you guys? Are you usually pretty comfortable sitting with somebody while they're crying?
Unless it's my parents, then I feel bad.
Yeah.
If it's other people, I'm like, okay.
Okay. It can be hard to watch people cry, especially people you care about, like family. But that's a really big part about being a therapist too. It's just building up that resiliency.
This is kind of a personal question. What is the funniest thing that a client has said to you?
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm trying to think. Well, with confidentiality, I can't give you any like direct client quotes. I think that I'll give you a few funny like general situations. Some of my favorites are tantrums with little kids. Like, I feel like I'm in a hostage negotiations like situation sometimes. 4-year-olds pack a pretty hard punch. So that has been that's been some of the funniest. Well, I think they're funny. Most people think they're funny, but I think those situations are fun.
Yeah, I just thought of this question, but like, how big is the sandbox that you use for your therapy?
Yeah, it is about the size of 4 laptops put together. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So nobody gets in the sandbox.
You might not be able to share this, but what is the biggest story of a person's past that has affected you?
Oh, that's a good one. So I'll give you general stuff. Trauma has been really hard to listen to sometimes. people have been through such hard things, and it can be hard to sit with them and hear them open up about traumatic situations like Sasha's situation.
So you said at like 4 years throwing temper tantrums, and at like the age of 4, I can't think of a reason why I would need a therapist, but what could be some?
Oh, that's such a good one. Okay, so with little kids, man, I feel like everybody could see a therapist at 3 or 4 because you're learning how to handle life and you're learning how to interact with people socially and interact with parents. So some kiddos just have a hard time expressing their feelings. And okay, my favorite question, let's say you were really, really mad, okay, and you couldn't use words to describe it. What would you do?
Scream.
Yeah, exactly, right? You would scream.
Hit
and cry.
someone.
So one of my
The
biggest
violence.
things that I help little kids do is express, like, or help them learn how to express their feelings so it doesn't result in big blow-ups. You guys have got some good questions.
Has anyone ever had a story like Sasha's that's come to you?
What do you think? Yeah, Sasha's story was really intense. I have never heard one quite like that, with that amount of violence, no.
What is the oldest patient you have like received, and what was he, or what was what was? I can
Why
think.
were they there?
Why were they there? Yeah, I can think.
A lot of clients who are older, man, I'm trying to think. I've seen people that are in their late 70s, early 80s. I know there are some people who specialize in working with senior citizens, and they'll see people all the way up to, death. One of my friends is a hospice therapist, and he works with clients while they're in the dying process, and then works with their families after they die. So he sees clients that are older than I do. But a lot of older clients come with life transition problems, right? Like they're retired, they're not working, maybe their families moved away. So those are some things I work on with that population.
Did your patients are most teenagers or just families like
Yeah.
old guys or something like that?
So, and man, okay, so like 11 and 12, and then high school. Those are the big ones. Are you guys on a question?
Yep.
Kind of.
Do you have any like questions that you're kind of not sure
Think
if
right
you
now.
should ask or not, but you want to ask?
Someone? No?
No. All right, Candy, then. I'll
Yay.
Candy.
Yay. So I stopped. You
Yeah,
stopped.
Manuel's like, finally!
I really moved the order of the questions, so I was like, I'm waiting.